Hi, everybody. This is David Nevins for Citybiz List. And today we continue with another interview in our series sponsored by the Bridge Alliance, which we call Fixing America's Broken Democracy. And all the folks we've been interviewing are playing a role in that. And today our guest is Bradley Tusk. And Bradley is the founder of what is known as the Mobile Voting Project. Bradley, welcome to our program.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No, it's great to have you. So, Bradley, you have quite a background. I'm not really sure where to start. I know you've been a venture capitalist, political strategist, philanthropist, writer. I know you've run Mayor Bloomberg's campaigns and on and on and on. So, I guess I'll say, tell us a little bit about yourself. But then, segue into what led you to become the founder of the Mobile Voting Project, and what is the Mobile Voting Project trying to accomplish?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent the first part of my career, as you mentioned, directly in government and politics. Was Mike Bloomberg's campaign manager, worked for him at City Hall. I spent 4 years as the deputy governor of Illinois, a couple of years in Washington as Chuck Schumer's communications director. And the thing that I really took away from all of that is in politics, every policy output is the result of a political input. 99.9% of elected officials care more about being reelected than anything else by far. They literally, I believe, have almost this hole in their psyche, and the only thing that fills it is the validation and affirmation that comes with being in office, which means they are never, ever going to put something, a policy issue or something on principle ahead of what's expedient politically. And I just accept that, right? Rather than saying we have to change human nature, because my guess is in the Greek Senate and the Roman Senate, they were probably exactly the same. I say, accept them for what they are, but if we want different outputs, we need different inputs. About a decade ago, my first kind of foray into tech was running all the campaigns to legalize Uber and ride sharing around the US. And the way that we won, at the time we were a tiny little tech startup and the taxi industry was a pretty powerful cartel, was we mobilized our customers through the app and had them text or tweet or email or in some way tell their elected officials, don't take this thing away from me, I want it. We were able to get so many people to do it that we won in every single jurisdiction in the US. And I remember at the time thinking, wow, if people could vote like this, it would make such a big difference, because the people who are probably advocating for us through the app don't vote in most primaries and don't vote in most non-presidential elections. But at the time, the technology wasn't really there. But over the succeeding years, blockchain got better and better. And by 2018, out of my foundation, Tusk Philanthropies, we started funding elections around the US where people either with disabilities or deployed military were able to vote on their phone in elections over the blockchain or over the cloud. It's happened now in 20 different jurisdictions across 7 different states. Every single election was certified and audited by the National Cybersecurity Center, came back clean. Turnout on average has more than doubled. And the reason we're doing this is, to me, if you want to, like I said, you want to change the outputs, you got to change the inputs. And if we want politicians to have a political incentive to reach consensus, to compromise, to stretch across the aisle, just to try to get things done, they've got to believe they'll be rewarded for that, not punished. That's only going to happen with dramatically higher turnout, especially in the primaries. And that's only going to happen, in my view, if we have mobile voting.
I guess I want to say I hear you and I agree with you, although it's kind of sad to think that you just accept as reality the fact that political expediency beats doing the right thing, I'll say, all the time. But nevertheless, let's not get into that. It certainly appears as if issues like mobile voting and so forth are under attack today, than as opposed to being more widespread. And though this interview won't air perhaps for a week or two, I was just reading what the state of Texas did. And so how are you succeeding? How are you pushing it forward?
It's a great question.
What's the next step?
Yeah, look, it's a great question. And it's not surprising, by the way, that mobile voting is under attack, because fundamentally if you radically change turnout in primaries, then you're taking a lot of groups and people who currently have power in the current system and possibly taking it away from them. So they're not going to go down without a fight. They're going to fight us every step of the way to try to keep what they have. With that said, there has been a decent amount of progress for mobile voting. So a bunch of different states, most recently Colorado, have passed bills allowing electronic ballot return either for military or people with disabilities. We're working with different Native American and tribal communities right now about expanding mobile voting to those populations. So there does seem to be more and more interest from secretaries of state, from election officials. In Washington, D.C., in the city council, a bill was recently introduced that would make mobile voting available to all voters. It's a bill that we strongly support. And so for us, there's really three next steps. Number one, get the technology right. We are at the early stages of building our own mobile voting technology that we're funding out of my foundation. And once we're done, we will give it away to governments open source for free. Two, pass laws allowing people to be able to vote on their phones. So there's DC, as I mentioned. We're looking at campaigns in about half a dozen more states for 2022, where we would run legislation to expand mobile voting. And the third would be build a movement, right? So we may be in a position to build the right technology, to pass some laws, but at the end of the day, neither of us are just single-handedly going to topple the entire political power structure in the United States. It's only going to happen if people like my kids who are 15 and 12, if their generation demands it and says, I absolutely should be able to vote on my phone. I refuse to accept all the excuses you're giving me as to why I cannot. And that's why we have a team basically spending all of their time on TikTok and Twitch and Instagram, really talking about mobile voting to that generation. Because if they're not willing to fight for it and demand it, we probably won't win.
Bradley, it certainly seems logical. The folks who want voting to occur, just in the old schoolhouse and you wait in line from 7 a.m. till 7 p.m. and so on and so forth. Those are the same people that are, they're buying stuff on Amazon. They're riding in Ubers. They're getting pizza delivered to their homes through their cell phones. But the way we vote in this country just kind of remains, kind of a mid-20th century style. So I think the building of the movement, Bradley, that piece of it is probably, it just seems to me to be the most important. So
sure.
how do you, and the hardest, right? So what are you doing toward that end? We're trying to give you a little bit of visibility here, but
I appreciate it. So one is, we're working with the Bridge Alliance, which we're really grateful to be a part of, because it's a lot of like-minded people who are trying to achieve goals that are either pretty similar to ours. But it's organizing online, college ambassadors, really doing a lot of press and events around mobile voting. It's going to really take just making the case in every form possible: digital, TV, podcast, print, physical, grassroots, whatever it is, so that people demand it. And look, when enough people demand something, it tends to happen, right? Whether it was the Arab Spring or same-sex marriage. So these things can happen, but it does require there to be significant demand from a particular demographic and constituency. And so that's really what we're building towards.
Well, that sounds great. Tell our viewers how they can become involved in the mobile voting project, and is there such a thing as joining this movement, and how can they help bring this about?
Yeah. So if you just go to mobilevoting.org and just hit the contact, please email us. We'll get right back to you and just tell us where you live, what you're interested in, how you might want to help. I think the two things that we're going to need the most help with is, one, once we start running all of these bills around the country to pass mobile voting, to make it accessible for everyone, those are big campaigns, right? And we're going to need supporters, we're going to need advocates, we're going to need people, banging on doors on our behalf. So that's number one. And then number two would be, if you're watching this and you have a group or organization that you think would be interested in hearing mobile voting, we'd love to talk to them, right? I mean, we just have to kind of spread the message as widely as we can. And so if there are people that you think would be receptive to the message, we're here and we'd love to be connected.
Bradley, it seems to me, just before we let you go, that, mobile voting, would be potentially attacked by the opponents, maybe on a couple of fronts. One would be, the security of elections, and this makes them less secure. So I'd like I'll ask you to answer that.
Sure.
And then the other is, does it not shift? Not everybody has a mobile device, though it seems to me virtually everybody does. And so is that an area where the idea would also potentially be attacked as something that would allow the haves to vote in greater numbers potentially than the have-nots?
Yeah. So the first one's hard, second one's easy. So I'm going to tackle them in reverse order. We're not arguing to get rid of vote by mail or election machines or any other way that people vote. This would just be an additional way. So if this is how you want to cast your ballot, great. You want to go somewhere, great. You want to do it by mail, great. And by the way, I think something like 85 to 90% of American adults now have smartphones. So we're pretty close to universal penetration. But I think we want to make all forms of voting available so that people have a lot of different choices. First one is harder, and that's certainly where they attack us. You mentioned Texas. When politicians don't want more people to vote, they don't admit, oh, I don't want minorities to vote or whatever it is. They just say, oh, it's not secure, right? And that's what they say about us as well, because they don't really want turnout to expand meaningfully. And look, that's why we've had the National Cybersecurity Center audit every single mobile voting election to date. They have all come back clean. It's why I'm spending a lot of money to build new mobile voting technology, working with a lot of the different leaders in cybersecurity, in academia, in the elections business to really make sure we get something exactly right. And also, look, if the standard we're held against is perfection, we're not going to meet it because no system of voting does. The paper ballots got us to hanging chads in 2000 and the Iraq War, which we're still extricating ourselves from. Voting machines break all the time. Would vote by mail. They weren't really sure how to handle and count a lot of that in the last presidential election. So no form of voting is perfect, but I want mobile voting to be at least as secure, if not more secure, than what we have right now. And that's why I'm investing these resources to do that.
Good for you. Bradley, one last question. I think that most of us, we understand certainly the concept of mobile voting. We get it. We use our smartphones for 100 different tasks every day. But I don't think most of us are actually familiar with instances where it's already used in the form of an election. Could you just share with us a couple of those?
So West Virginia, South Carolina, Utah, Colorado, Washington State, Oregon, and one more that I'm forgetting now. So 7 different states have run pilot programs that we've funded out of our foundation that allow people either who are overseas in their deployed military or people with disabilities to use their phone. And if you think about those two demographics, it makes a lot of sense. For deployed military, here are people who are literally risking their lives to protect our right to vote, even if it's a right that we don't use nearly enough. And then by the time their ballot gets mailed in from Kandahar or wherever they're going to be next, the election's been done for weeks and it gets thrown in the trash. So, making it easier for them to vote is really important. And then if you're deaf or blind, the smartphones, I understand, it has really changed your life. Just giving you a tremendous amount more ability to interact with the world and do things. And think about being blind and, you've got to get someone to take you to the polling place. You've got to wait in some special line for someone to help you. You have to have a total stranger mark down your ballot choices for you. You have to hope that they did what you asked them to do because you won't know because you're blind. And then you have to get back to where you started again. So that's a really difficult thing to ask of someone to do. Whereas, there's so much technology on people's phones right now that are accessible for people with disabilities. That those were the two obvious starting points for us. Also, maybe as people are realizing, politicians on the right like the military voting, politicians on the left like the disability. So we tried to have one for everyone. And I think we'll just try to keep working with groups that are hard to object to until we can eventually work our way into the center and let everyone vote this way.
Or as we started out the interview, maybe you need to figure out a way to make mobile voting more politically expedient. And that's when it will
Yeah, and look, it's interesting, right? Because I do think that people who are in the center like it and will like it because it makes it easier for them to then do what they instinctively want to do anyway, which is get things done. And look, most people run for office because they want to try to get things done. They're just not willing to sacrifice their career to get things done. And then instinctively, the far left and far right should oppose us because, when turnout in primaries is 10 to 15%, they tend to control it. And that gives them a lot of power. The larger the turnout, the more diffuse their power becomes. However, both of those groups feel like they're really adept online and at the internet and everything else. And if they think, look, this could give us a strategic advantage because we can bring our people out in more force online than we could in a physical election, then maybe they'll adopt it too. So we'll talk to anybody. We'll meet with anybody. Our hope is to convert as many people as we can.
That's great. Bradley, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
This has been David Nevins for Citybiz List, and this interview was sponsored by the Bridge Alliance, and it's part of our ongoing series called Fixing America's Broken Democracy. If you'd like to see more mobile voting, reach out to Bradley and his colleagues at the Mobile Voting Project. This is David Nevins for Citybiz List. Thank you for watching.